It started like any other day for Pauletta, Washington. She brewed her coffee, carefully arranging her favorite porcelain mugs, and smiled at the morning sunlight as it spilled into their Los Angeles home. But this morning, unlike the countless others, carried an invisible weight that no one could have prepared for. Within weeks, the warmth of her routine was replaced with hospital hallways, hushed conversations, and the cold metallic hum of medical machines that seemed to echo every unspoken fear. Pauletta, vibrant, strong, and endlessly supportive of her husband Denzel Washington's illustrious career, had been diagnosed with an advanced-stage radiation-induced cancer, a rare and aggressive form that doctors described as almost unheard of. "She won't make it," one specialist whispered during a meeting with Denzel, words that landed like a hammer to the chest, reverberating in a way that no Hollywood script could ever capture. Before we continue, please hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell for updates. At first, disbelief was the only response. How could this happen? Pauletta had no history of radiation therapy, no occupational exposure, no known environmental risks. She was careful, cautious, and meticulous about health. She was the very image of someone who should have been safe. Yet, the malignancy spread with a speed that defied explanation, and every lab test, every scan, seemed only to deepen the mystery. It wasn't just the diagnosis, it was the story behind it that began to unravel with terrifying clarity. Specialists grew concerned when they noticed something odd. The radiation signature in Pauletta's tissues didn't match anything common in medical treatments or industrial exposure. Instead, it aligned with isotopes used in military-grade materials, exotic, potent, and extraordinarily dangerous. One physician, a veteran oncologist with decades of experience, leaned closer to Denzel and murmured a warning that felt as if it came from a nightmare rather than a hospital. "This isn't just cancer. This is contamination." Denzel, a man whose career had spanned decades and whose on-screen presence commanded respect, was suddenly thrust into a role he had never trained for. This was no longer about scripts, accolades, or awards. It was about uncovering a hidden truth that threatened the life of the woman he loved. He began his own private investigation, quietly but relentlessly, retracing every detail of their lives over the past decades. And then the past returned in the most horrifying way. Years earlier, Denzel had been cast in a military biopic, a project shrouded in secrecy and ambition, titled Operation Ghost. It was meant to be a cinematic masterpiece, authentic, raw, and unflinchingly realistic. To achieve this, the production team had procured a collection of decommissioned military artifacts, radios, helmets, even memorabilia designed to recreate the tense atmosphere of nuclear warfare. These props, allegedly safe, had been supplied by a defense subcontractor and labeled as decommissioned, inert, and harmless. But some of them weren't harmless at all. Unbeknownst to anyone on set, low levels of residual radioactive particles clung to the metal and fabric, lingering invisibly on the very surfaces touched by the actors and crew. Pauletta, who had accompanied Denzel to the set on numerous occasions, had even tried on one of the helmets during a private, playful moment. A photograph captured her smiling in what now looked like a frozen memory of impending danger. The laughter, the behind-the-scenes joy, had been shadowed by invisible radiation, accumulating silently over time until it finally exacted its cruel toll. The film itself never reached audiences. Operation Ghost was quietly scrapped and buried by the studio after whistleblowers flagged safety concerns. No one on set had been warned. The subcontractor had gone bankrupt following multiple lawsuits involving radiation exposure in the military collector community. Denzel's life, Pauletta's life, and countless others had unknowingly intersected with the remnants of a bureaucratic and corporate failure that no one had wanted to acknowledge publicly. As Denzel confronted studio executives, military consultants, and federal liaisons, he was met with deflection, stonewalling, and the cold certainty of self-preservation. "You're chasing ghosts?" one executive told him, though Denzel had already seen the evidence. Whispers of a cover-up began to swirl. A retired consultant, speaking off the record, handed him a single, chilling line. "They knew what was in those crates. You were just never supposed to find out." Those words settled heavily, as if a shadow had been cast over every award, every standing ovation, every public appearance Denzel had celebrated over decades. The personal toll was immediate and devastating. Pauletta's condition deteriorated rapidly. Days that once included casual walks in the garden and dinners with close friends became punctuated by oxygen machines, for drips, and the constant presence of nurses. Yet, in those moments of fragility, Pauletta's strength shone in ways that defied the grim statistics. She refused to succumb to bitterness or rage. Instead, she chronicled her experience in a video diary, leaving messages that were as clear-eyed as they were heartbreaking. She spoke not of vengeance, but of clarity, urging Denzel to pursue the truth, to shine light on the negligence that had brought her here. No other wife, mother, or woman who stands behind a great man should pay the price for silence, she said, her voice steady despite the frailty that had crept into her frame. The investigation unfolded like a thriller that few could believe was real. Denzel traced the origins of the props, obtaining internal memos, shipping logs, and photographs that documented the handling of materials labeled decommissioned, but imbued with lingering nuclear particles. He cross-referenced isotopes detected in Pauletta's tissue with scientific reports on the types of isotopes used in military equipment, confirming that the exposure matched the timeline of Operation Ghost's production. Each revelation intensified the magnitude of what had occurred, turning what initially appeared to be a personal tragedy into a scandal with national implications. As Denzel pursued justice, he faced ethical and emotional dilemmas that challenged his core. Would going public endanger ongoing government projects, compromise military secrets, or even put other loved ones at risk? Could he balance the pursuit of truth with the immediacy of Pauletta's fight for life? The choices were agonizing, and yet, in his private moments, he found himself fueled by the unwavering love that had always defined their partnership. Throughout it all, Pauletta remained a guiding presence. Her final video diary was both haunting and inspiring, a testament to resilience, love, and moral clarity. She spoke directly to Denzel, to the public, to anyone who would listen, emphasizing that the pursuit of justice was not about anger, but about responsibility. Seek the truth, she urged. Expose what is hidden, so others do not suffer as I have. Her words, though spoken quietly in the solitude of her bedroom, carried a resonance far beyond their walls, echoing a call for accountability that could not be ignored. The narrative, however, held another cruel twist. As Denzel prepared to reveal the evidence publicly, to confront the studio, military consultants, and federal authorities, he discovered discrepancies in the historical documentation. Certain shipping records had been altered, timestamps manipulated, and internal emails missing. The deeper he dug, the clearer it became that a deliberate effort had been made to obscure the truth. This was no isolated oversight. It was a calculated effort to conceal potential liability, a stark reminder of the intersection between corporate interest, government secrecy, and human cost. And yet, amidst the shadow of bureaucracy, the fear of retaliation, and the grief that threatened to engulf him, Denzel found unexpected allies. Whistleblowers from within the studio, scientists who had quietly flagged inconsistencies, and retired military consultants who had long questioned safety protocols came forward. They offered corroborating evidence, expert analysis, and, in some cases, sworn statements. Each piece of information strengthened the case that Pauletta's exposure was not a freak accident but the result of systemic negligence. The public revelation, when it finally came, was seismic. Denzel, known worldwide for his roles that often embodied moral integrity and courage, became the face of a fight against invisible hazards, corporate concealment, and governmental complacency. News outlets amplified the story, dissecting Operation Ghost's history, the bankruptcy of the subcontractor, and the rare isotopes that had been at the heart of Pauletta's illness. Social media erupted with outrage, speculation, and calls for accountability. For once, Hollywood glamour collided with the stark, unforgiving realities of toxic exposure, and the world could not look away. Even in her final days, Pauletta's influence was profound. Her insistence on documenting the truth, her compassion for others, and her insistence on forgiveness rather than vengeance became guiding principles for Denzel. He continued to navigate hospital corridors, meetings with legal teams, and media interviews, each step taken in her honor. She had, in life and in death, framed the narrative not as a tragedy alone, but as a clarion call for vigilance, transparency, and ethical responsibility. As the story unfolded, it became evident that the legacy of Operation Ghost would not be cinematic but historical. Scholars, journalists, and investigative teams began analyzing the broader implications, from the oversight of defense contractors to the systemic gaps in government regulation. Every revelation prompted questions. How many other props or decommissioned materials had been mishandled? How many lives had been quietly affected? And what responsibility did corporations and government entities hold when negligence led to irreversible harm? The weight of these questions was matched only by Denzel's resolve. He was no longer just an actor, a celebrity, or a public figure. He had become an advocate, a relentless pursuer of truth, and a voice for those rendered invisible by bureaucratic indifference. Yet,